Hi, I'm Sam, and this is my Prof G brand strategy sprint. I've chosen Yoga Rise for a yoga studio here in London, a small business. One I don't expect you to be familiar with, but I am, as somebody who's been there a lot, actually teaches there occasionally, has friends who teach there and go there too. So I have a good idea of the business from both sides. Yoga Rise started in Peckham in South London in 2014, riding on the wave of yoga's growth in the UK. So from this period, you can see here, searches for yoga classes near me really on a steady rise from that point Yoga Rise opened in 2014 in the years that followed. And Peckham was really the perfect place for them to start, an area previously deprived, seeing an influx of wealth of new people. Here you can see the property prices increasing in turn with that and investment. And then after 5 years of Peckham, they expanded, big year in 2019, opening a second and third studio and refurbishing the original. This was significant because it moved them beyond South London. So they started here in Peckham, the second one was in Streatham, and they went north of the River Thames, right to the heart of London, Covent Garden. To get our bearings here, this is where Queen lives. So Yoga is offering, they offer in-person yoga classes across these three locations, multiple different styles of modern yoga, kind of full breadth of classes. Since COVID-19, they're doing live streams of studio classes, also live streams with teachers from their homes when they can't get to the studio, workshops that are deep dives into something kind of specific to yoga, retreats, so kind of yoga holidays abroad, and the 200-hour yoga teacher training, which is the standard to become a yoga teacher. A lot of competition in yoga, so you can look at this at different levels. So you could have the local level, thinking about something like Peckham, company like Level 6, a yoga studio nearby, similar price point, similar target audience, just a few differences in the offering and the positioning. Or London more broadly, Try Yoga are an example, have 5 studios across London. Because of the location of those studios and the heritage of the brand, it's got a slightly older crowd. And then online, a huge kind of plethora. We could be thinking about yoga specific platforms where you sign up on a monthly subscription to access on demand classes. Or here I've got YouTube is the kind of ultimate entry point, free entry point, of course, where a lot of beginners go. Quality isn't great, but it is a place that people try without having to pay and without any of the kind of potentially intimidation or fear of going to a yoga studio. So yoga studios have a lot of challenges even before COVID-19. They've just become manifold, of course. So pre-COVID, we're talking about the saturation I just touched on. With that, it's hard to differentiate. Yoga Rise are the kind of higher end of pricing, so they seem to justify that price when there are cheaper options. Replicating the successful Peckham model in other locations is hard. There are intangibles there you're trying to recreate. Dependencies on fixed venues, so these studios, these overheads, again, even pre-COVID-19. And then relationship with teachers, the teachers are freelancers, not tied down to one studio, contracts are pretty loose if they exist. So that creates some complexity. And then now, there's of course this necessity to embrace digital. None of them were really online before. They have to be now to survive. And then when it comes back to going to the studios, as has been the case and will hopefully become the case, you have all the regulations in place. The stuff is not conducive to a relaxing environment. And then going back to the online experience, how do you make that feel premium? A class over Zoom, how do you make it have any of that sense of yoga rise that you get in the studio? The decreased revenue that comes with that, you just can't charge as much for those online classes. People won't pay it, even though you could think the audience is bigger. Competition still increases despite all of these challenges. You have something huge, Sport Plus coming, another platform for fitness that will have yoga on it. And then the competition with their own teachers. Teachers are teaching their own classes online over Zoom, taking all the income rather than splitting the cost of the studio, which makes sense if you think about the contract or freelance setup that I just spoke about. So if we look at the clock model, regularizing the pre-purchase of a lot of the things you'd imagine, social media, website, email newsletter, real life word of mouth, offers to get people in, purchase, the things I just mentioned there, studio classes, online classes, workshops, teacher training, also membership people might sign up for even a year to keep kind of coming back. And then as you can see here, post-purchase very light, reviews, if people choose to leave them, some teaching opportunities for grads, so people who come off the Yoga Rise teacher training get the opportunity to teach at Yoga Rise, super light in that last segment. Looking at brand audit and brand identity, the positive and negative associations for the brand. So positive right now, particularly thinking about Peckham, which is what people I spoke to tended to think about too, because that's what you think about when you think about Yoga Rise still, would be its local residents are coming. There's a nice atmosphere there. The space itself is welcoming. They have above average teachers. They're good at selecting teachers. And there's a vibrancy there, trendy, young, however you want to put it, there is a vibrancy. But on the flip side, there's another side to this coin. Some of these might be negative for people. With that community, it might feel a bit cliquey, might feel like a bit of a closed circle for some. So it is expensive. It's not a cheap thing to just try. They lack diversity, so they've tried to do a lot about this, as a lot of businesses have more recently, and they're doing it in the teaching staff, but that's not necessarily changing who's coming to classes yet. And that trendy young vibe can feel too young, can feel a bit immature for some, I would certainly say so. Looking at brand identity, working it kind of out in the extended identity. So the person, it's actually the dog Misty, the dog of the owners, cute dog, but I'm not sure if it's the right representation of the brand. It feels a bit cliche, dogs and yoga to me, but it's definitely what you'd think of now. Symbol, people said the same. They think of the shapes, they think of yellow and pink specifically. Product, it would be some of the strongest, most popular classes where you really get that sense of atmosphere and just great teaching too. And then the organization culture is led by the owners. It's a small business, and what they say goes. So that is dominant at the moment. The core identity, we'd put it down as welcoming community, with high quality teaching, attachment, and vibrant atmosphere. So I can articulate some of those things. And then that leads me to a brand essence of fun, friendly yoga. So it's not too serious, it's not too dour, it's in depth. People, the yoga means a lot to people, but it's still kind of fun and friendly. But I look at that and I think, this isn't clearing the 3 hurdles, or certainly not clearly clearing the 3 hurdles. So we need to take a look at this. Brings me on to strategic recommendations. So I think the big kind of high level strategic move is to define a truer, prouder brand essence, something that ticks these 3 boxes of differentiation, relevance, and sustainability. First step to doing that, I think, is to work to improve upon those negatives. So can they make it feel less cliquey? Can they ensure teachers welcome people in digitally or in real world? Can they do more to make it less expensive? So they have some classes that are cheap, but can they do something bigger about the price point? Can they improve upon the diversity of people coming to class, perhaps through where they advertise? And I do think they should make the brand more mature, kind of add a bit more class to it, really, and to kind of deal with the fact that it could feel a bit young. So that'll be the first step. The second step on this kind of high level recommendation is when the opportunity arises to go back to their roots, to move away from Covent Garden, go back to South London, the sense of local, which you just can't have in the centre of London when it's kind of commuters and previously kind of working crowd. It just doesn't feel the same. Third point of this part of this whole new brand essence that we're trying to get to and live by is how do they create an online experience that isn't just a Zoom class, but it feels like a Yoga Rise online experience. There are like many small things that they could try to do that. So I think if they do those things and move on from a brand essence, currently now fun, friendly yoga brings in some of those positive qualities at the bottom, but I don't think it's strong enough to perhaps something like your yoga studio. So the sense of the sense of local, of community, of loyalty, of not needing any other place, not needing any other teachers. And your yoga studio to mean online or real life studio. So your yoga studio could be your home, but it's still brought to you by Yoga Rise. It could be your yoga studio, the one you love to go to down the road. There are opportunities around the clock for Yoga Rise, pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase. And pre-purchase, I think they could do more content, more videos, think about a podcast. I think they could introduce trial classes, actually free classes for people who never tried yoga as a loss leader. They could think about local partnerships too. And purchase, I think they need more investment around the delivery of the online classes beyond, just it being on Zoom. What are the kind of things around the edges they can do? And then the studio, I think you could kind of take that thermometer approach of having the elements that stay the same, but then these different locations, even in different spots of South London, what are the bits that are different, perhaps in the advertising or perhaps in the language? But the big focus, it's kind of obvious because it's so light, would be the post-purchase segment. So how can they foster community? Perhaps they could have elements in real life and online to try and stimulate some of that community that you did get in the studio spaces. So maybe it is encouraging conversation, maybe it's organizing discussions, just trying these aspects. I think they could have more feedback from people, actually ask people what they want to have, what they want to see more, what they enjoy, to have that sense of ownership of your yoga studio. I think they could think about discovery and other classes you could enjoy and how they do that, which I'll come on to in a bit. And then for the teacher trainees, the alumni of their teacher training program, how do they group all of those people that have kind of been on that journey and have that feeding into the community and vice versa? So that's the high level, this new brand essence, and the steps that you need to take to get there, as well as those things they could do around the clock, but particularly in post-purchase. And to zoom on a couple of more tactical ideas. First one, I think this is a quality Q idea. They need to double down on the magic of the studio. As people come back, they need to instantly feel viscerally why they come back, why it's better to go to the studio than have the convenience of doing yoga at home. So it could be a centerpiece like a fireplace. It could be the nature, the greenery, the plants they have there. It could be the quality of the mats. It could be the smell. Perhaps they could own a smell. But I think one of these things might be one of those steps that seems like an overinvestment or a weird time to invest in that. But I think it could be a spark of something necessary and kind of magical when people are returning to the studio. And the second, in terms of discovery, now this could be for online classes, it could be for in person, but there's currently nothing after you've been to a class to suggest to do any other classes you could try, where they would have that information. You have to scour through kind of the biographies of teachers and just give one a go. I don't think it'd be too hard for them to say, if you enjoyed this class with this teacher, you might try and enjoy this other class with this other teacher. So just kind of recap on what I think the first steps would be, the kind of action items that are grounded in some reality and practicality too, and understanding they're going to be concerned about investment at a time where they're just trying to survive. But I think they need to take some of these measures to not just to survive, but to start to kind of thrive when they come out the other side of this. So the first would be to encourage that interaction before and after online classes, to bring back a sense of community. So at the moment, you're kind of dumped into a class, a bit like a meeting, and then you're kicked out a bit at the end, and all the yoga studios are kind of doing this. But they make sure there is a window of time at the start and the end. The teachers are asked to and paid to be there for that length of time to kind of welcome people in and kind of have those conversations. Could they secondly ramp up the atmosphere, the feeling, the wonder of being back in the studio through one of those measures? Maybe it's the smell. Maybe that's a kind of simpler, easy place to start. Maybe they could really make it feel like when you go back into the studio for the first time, that sense of smell, it's a reminder of why you still bother to go there. It's a reminder of being in a different space, away from your work, away from your home, and really taking some time to enjoy that experience in a space that's quite important to you. And the third one I've already touched on. I think to be true to this new brand essence, to be about local, to be about community, they need to move away from Covent Garden when the opportunity comes to kind of close that studio and get out of that space. So I think if they take these steps, there's kind of high level strategic move on the brand essence, these kind of ideas around the clock model, particularly in post-purchase, and the tactical ideas, a couple I've suggested there, they could create this growing but still fundamentally local brand. As they say in yoga, namaste.